One of Mandy Steingasser's favorite things to do was spend time outdoors with her father, Richard. They would go fishing and on camping trips together. On one of those camping trips, Mandy found a ground squirrel and picked it up to cuddle with it. Rather than go along with Mandy's plan, the ground squirrel bit her. This was not unusual behavior for Mandy. When she came across snakes on other camping trips, she would pick them up and pet them, rather than run away from them. These incidents reflected Mandy's personality very well. She was brave, loved animals, and did not let their perceived dangers or flaws influence how she treated others, both animals and people. She had a wide variety of friends, and was very loyal to all of them. She did not judge anyone, which led her to befriending some individuals other people would have stayed away from. When her decision to associate with these friends was questioned, Mandy would say that they were her friends, and that was important above all else. In the fall of 1993, 17-year-old Mandy was a senior at North Tonawanda High School outside of Buffalo, New York. She did not yet have any solid plans for her career, so she planned to begin her collegiate studies at Niagara County Community College after graduation. According to her parents, Mandy was a good kid. She had her flaws and was not a straight-A student, but she cared about protecting the environment, loved and respected her parents, and was a good friend. Like many teenagers, Mandy liked to go to parties and experiment with drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes. According to one of her close friends, with whom she would go to parties, Mandy liked to push her limits, but was not a problem drinker and did not let herself get out of control. Mandy's parents were concerned about her partying, but they also trusted their daughter's character and decided to set up a system of rules around Mandy's social life, rather than attempt to force her to stop going to parties. They would set a curfew for each evening Mandy went out, which Mandy agreed to. If something prevented her from arriving home on time, she would call her parents to tell them why she was delayed and when she would be home. Mandy also had to wake her parents up when she arrived home, so they would know she had safely returned. She and her parents had a standing agreement that should she ever find herself in a bad situation, she could call them, and they would come get her. Mandy adhered to her parents' set of rules. However, she did not do so on September 18, 1993. That Saturday night, Mandy spent the evening with her friend Stacy, Stacy's boyfriend Brian, and Brian's friend Wayne. Stacy would be sleeping over at the Steingasser house, and Mandy had promised her parents that they would return by midnight. Stacy was Mandy's age, but Wayne and Brian were a few years older, meaning they could buy alcohol, and Wayne had his own apartment. That evening, the group went to a liquor store to buy whiskey and rum before heading to Wayne's apartment on Ironton Street in North Tonawanda. Around 9 p.m., they got into Wayne's car and drove to Buffalo. The group was planning on seeing a rock band play a set at a bar on Forest Avenue. However, Mandy and Stacy were both underage and were not able to get past the bouncer at the door. Brian and Wayne left with them, stopping at a friend's house party before returning to North Tonawanda and Wayne's apartment. By this time, it was clear that Mandy and Stacy were going to miss their midnight curfew. However, for some reason, Mandy deviated from her normal routine and did not call her parents to update them about where she was and when she could get home. At this time, according to Stacy, she and Mandy were buzzed, but not overly intoxicated. There was a house party going on at a home on First Avenue, and Mandy, Stacy, Brian, and Wayne decided to walk over to it. However, while they were on their way, a group of men pulled up alongside them in a car. They began yelling at Brian and Wayne, accusing them of harassing a woman from the neighborhood. This had not happened, but the men in the car did not wait for Brian and Wayne to clear things up, and instead got out of their car and attacked them. The fight did not last long, as sirens were soon heard, and the other men got back in their car and took off. Mandy and Stacy had gotten scared and walked away from the scene when the fight broke out. As they got away, they became separated. Brian had yelled for the two girls to come back when the men drove off. Mandy had been afraid that the police would soon be there and insist on driving her home because she was underage, which would have ruined her plan to try to sneak into the house without her parents realizing she had missed curfew. When Mandy did not rejoin the group, Stacy was upset because she thought Mandy had gone home without her. They called Mandy's name several times, but she did not come back to meet them. Mandy apparently began walking to her house, which was over a mile away. She walked north on Oliver Street until she reached a convenience store at the intersection of 5th Avenue. Witnesses at the intersection saw a passing car make a U-turn in order to pull up next to Mandy as she was walking past the store. Mandy leaned into the passenger side window to talk to the driver, an acquaintance from school, for a few minutes before getting into the car sometime between 1:20 and 1:30 a.m. on September 19th. Mandy was never seen alive again. Mandy's mother, Lorraine, was awoken by a phone call at 2:30 a.m. The call was from Stacy, and Lorraine could hear male voices in the background, encouraging her to ask if Mandy had arrived home. Lorraine knew that Mandy had not come home, even before searching the rest of the house, because Mandy had not come in to wake her up when she arrived, as usual. Lorraine's initial reaction was anger at the fact that her daughter had missed curfew and not called home. She was awake for the rest of the night, waiting for Mandy, but she never arrived. In the morning, she began calling around to Mandy's friends, but no one knew where she was. One of Mandy's friends was the daughter of a police officer, and he sent a patrolman over to the Steingasser home to take a missing persons report. The North Tonawanda police quickly came to the conclusion that Mandy was simply a runaway. This frustrated Mandy's parents, who knew her well enough to know that even if she had run away on her own accord, she still would have called home to tell them so. A boy she had been dating had just moved to Florida, but without a call from Mandy saying she had followed him south, they did not believe that this was the case. The Steingassers therefore contacted the FBI, who also began looking into the disappearance. Just over 5 weeks after Mandy was last seen, on October 25th, 1993, 2 men were hunting for mushrooms in Bond Lake Park when they came across a set of badly decomposed human remains near an embankment in a wooded area near Myers Lake. The remains would later be determined to belong to Mandy. Mandy's body was located less than 50 yards away from an area used as a local lover's lane. Police believe that her killer had tried to roll her body down the embankment, thinking it would go into the lake, but it was caught on some bushes on the way down. Police did not immediately make Mandy's cause of death public, beyond stating that she had extensive injuries to her upper body. It would later be revealed that she had been strangled with her own bra. She had also sustained head injuries, with the autopsy finding 2 brain hemorrhages and a skull fracture near her left temple. Police had become suspicious of the schoolmate whose car Mandy had last been seen getting into within days of her going missing, both because he was the last person known to be with her, and because of his behavior after her disappearance. While they publicly discussed that they had a main suspect in the case, they did not publicly identify him. They collected evidence as part of their investigation into him, but the technology available in 1993 was not sensitive enough to tie him to the murder. As technology advanced in the following decades, the evidence was retested, and authorities eventually had enough evidence to charge their prime suspect. On April 24, 2018, nearly 25 years after Mandy was killed, Joseph Belstadt was arrested at his residence as he returned home after work. The following day, on Belstadt's 43rd birthday, he was arraigned on a charge of second-degree murder. Mandy's parents never fully recovered from the death of their only child. They stored some old furniture in Mandy's bedroom, but otherwise left it untouched, with all of her belongings left in their place. Richard Steingasser passed away in 2015, 3 years before an arrest was finally made in his daughter's case. Belstadt, then 18 years old, had come in to the North Tonawanda Police Detective Bureau 2 days after Mandy went missing, identifying himself as the person who had picked Mandy up at the corner of Oliver and 5th. He told police that Mandy had only been in his car for a few minutes. Shortly after she got into the vehicle and he began driving her home, she decided to go back to the house party she had planned to go to with Wayne, Brian, and Becky. He claimed he turned his car around and dropped her off in front of an old church at Oliver and First. When Mandy got out of his car, she walked up to a Puerto Rican man sitting on the church steps. Belstadt said that this was the last he saw of Mandy. Parts of Belstadt's story were confirmed by witnesses who saw Mandy get into his car, but some were not. Sisters Tanya and Rebecca Coughlin lived in an apartment at the intersection of 5th and Oliver. At the time Mandy got into Belstadt's vehicle in the early morning hours of September 19, 1993, Tanya was outside of their apartment, and Rebecca was watching her from inside through a window. They both confirmed that they saw a car drive past Mandy, then do a U-turn so it could pull up beside her at the intersection. Mandy and the driver spoke for a few minutes before Mandy got into the car and it drove away, turning to drive in the direction Mandy had been walking and the car had originally been driving. The sisters both recognized Belstadt as the driver of the car because they knew him from their old neighborhood, where Belstadt had also lived. Rebecca identified Mandy as the girl who got into his car that night because she recognized her from school. However, there was a key part of the sisters' story that differed from Belstadt's account. Rebecca remained at the window, looking out onto the street for 5 to 6 more minutes. If Belstadt had quickly turned his car around to drive Mandy back to Oliver and First, as he told police, she would have seen his car drive past her apartment. She did not see the car again, which she would have if Belstadt's statement was accurate. Furthermore, police were never able to locate witnesses who saw a Puerto Rican man near the church, Belstadt dropped Mandy off at the church, or Mandy anywhere in that area. They did, however, locate 2 witnesses who reported seeing Belstadt cleaning both the inside and outside of his car at a 24-hour coin-operated car wash at 2:15 a.m. or shortly thereafter, on the morning Mandy got into his car. Several of Belstadt's friends also came forward, admitting that he had asked them to provide a false alibi for him. One of these friends was Jerry Miller. Belstadt asked Jerry to tell police that they had gone to Canada together the night Mandy disappeared, so he would stay out of trouble. Jerry initially did so, but gave an accurate statement 3 days later. On September 18th, Jerry had gone to the police station in the city of Tonawanda with Belstadt, who was angry over 2 traffic tickets he had received there and wanted to contest them. When they left the station, Jerry did ask Belstadt to drive to Canada with him to buy beer. The legal purchasing age for alcohol was younger in Canada than it was in the United States. Belstadt declined, stating he was just going to drive around because he was still mad about the tickets. When he returned from Canada later on, Jerry drove past Belstadt's grandmother's house, where Belstadt had been staying, as well as his mother's house, but Belstadt's car was not at either location. Once he was confronted with the statements showing he had asked friends to lie for him and proving he had not gone to Canada that night as he claimed, Belstadt then said that after he dropped off Mandy near the church, he went to a donut shop and then returned home. Belstadt stopped attending the school where he and Mandy had both been students after she disappeared. Belstadt did come in to take 2 polygraphs during the time Mandy was missing. He walked out of the first one because he did not like the tone of the questioning he was subjected to. He completed the second exam, but he was found to be untruthful when he answered no to 2 questions, one asking if he was involved in Mandy's disappearance, and the other asking if he was withholding information. After Mandy's body was discovered, police caught Belstadt in another lie. They asked him if he was familiar with the area where the body was found, and he claimed not to be, and said he had never been there. However, authorities quickly found a young woman who reported that Belstadt had taken her to the remote location just weeks before Mandy was murdered. Forensic evidence could not prove Belstadt's involvement in Mandy's murder in 1993. A hair was found on Mandy's body, and while testing indicated that it could have come from Belstadt, it could not be conclusively proven to be his. Fibers found on Mandy's clothing were a match to the fibers from the carpet in the backseat area of Belstadt's vehicle, although this only confirmed that she was inside the car, which Belstadt did not dispute. Belstadt's car was seized and searched. It was during the search that the most crucial pieces of evidence were collected: 3 pubic hairs, 1 found on the front passenger side floor mat, and 2 located in the back seat of the vehicle. According to Belstadt, Mandy had only been in the front seat of his car, and only for a few minutes. Furthermore, the hairs still had their roots attached, which a forensic expert would later testify meant that they had been pulled from the skin with force. While the attached roots on the hairs would eventually mean that they could be tested for DNA, the technology to do so was not available in 1993. At the time, scientists could only state that the hairs were consistent with Mandy's pubic hair. The hairs were submitted for DNA testing in 2017, which confirmed that they belonged to Mandy Steingasser. This confirmation is what led to authorities finally charging Belstadt with her murder in 2018. Police believe that Belstadt had made sexual advances towards Mandy and reacted violently when she wanted the encounter to end, leading to a struggle. When Mandy's body was found, her pants were pulled partway down and had been torn. One of Mandy's fingernails had broken off. Based on the results of the autopsy, investigators argued that Belstadt struck Mandy in the head at some point during the struggle, and when he realized what he had done, he ripped off her bra, tearing out all of its hooks in the process, and strangled her with it. After Belstadt's arrest in April of 2018, 4 dates for his trial were set and then changed as a result of ongoing disagreements over pretrial evidentiary issues. On March 9, 2020, the process of jury selection for the trial finally began, and the selected jury heard opening statements and 1 day of testimony before Niagara County Judge Sarah Sheldon declared a mistrial on March 16th due to concerns that the COVID-19 pandemic would prevent the trial from successfully being completed. The trial finally began on October 25, 2021, 28 years to the day after Mandy's body was found. Belstadt's defense team relied heavily on the fact that traces of another man's DNA were found in Mandy's underwear during further testing in 2019. The DNA belonged to Mandy's ex-boyfriend, Christopher Palish, with whom she was known to have a sexual relationship. Police had investigated him back in 1993, but he had moved to Florida on September 17, 1993, the day before Mandy began her last evening out with her friends. The defense argued that this evidence was exculpatory, and Belstadt should have been released as soon as it was found. The prosecution argued that the defense was using the DNA as a distraction, as they were able to account for its presence, and the person it belonged to was not even in the state at the time of the murder. During the trial, the defense presented Christopher as an alternative suspect in the case, presenting his criminal charges in Florida for domestic violence and cruelty to animals as supporting evidence. The prosecution presented documents and called witnesses to confirm that Christopher had already moved away when Mandy was killed. On November 16, 2021, the jury returned their verdict. They found Belstadt guilty. In a subsequent interview with the Buffalo News, one of the jurors stated that the jury had not taken the defense's theory that Mandy's ex-boyfriend was responsible for her murder seriously. They went through all of the evidence carefully to be fair to Belstadt and do their job thoroughly, and ultimately found that they could not argue with the compelling scientific evidence. Belstadt's sentencing hearing was held on January 14, 2022. While Belstadt maintained his innocence, and his lawyer argued that sending her client to prison for the rest of his life was not justice, Mandy's mother, Lorraine, asked the court to impose a lengthy sentence. During the time Joe Belstadt has been living his life, my daughter did not, she told the court, adding, "He has been free for 28 years, and he should be sentenced for no less." Belstadt was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. He plans to appeal his conviction. Niagara County District Attorney Brian D. Seaman believes the case was handled properly and Belstadt's conviction will be upheld upon appeal. When asked what he would say to Mandy if he could speak with her now, he stated, "Mandy, we did everything that we could here to try to bring some level of justice for you and your family. And I'd say that the detectives in North Tonawanda, the individuals that worked in the Niagara County Forensic Lab, they never forgot about you."